Now, although we have hit the 3-week mark, I'll still say, welcome to the new Sportsline Podcast here on CHCH. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Folks, it is no secret, Southern Ontario is a hotbed for high-level athletes, coaches, executives, broadcaster, and today we dig into the columnist category. Hey, it all began at the University of Western. He's an institution at the Toronto Sun, and now Steve Simmons is the longest surveyed active sports columnist in Canada. He's certainly not afraid to ask tough questions, and for that reason, his material, such as Simmons says, and his Sunday Notes column is must-read material. He's authored multiple books. He's been a co-host on radio and television, won awards. He's in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. And to top it off, he's a huge fan of Pierre Engvall. I know that for sure. Steve Simmons, thank you for being on the Sportsline Podcast.
Can I go home now? That's a great introduction. I don't have to say anything now.
Well, I mean, you've established yourself. You know, what people don't need to know right now is actually we are talking to you from where?
Somewhere other than Canada. I'm not going to disclose the location for personal reasons, and enjoying time away from the winter.
Well, I hope you're certainly enjoying yourself. Look, let's talk about this. I bring up the Pierre Engvall because it's driving me absolutely nuts. The guy had a video tribute yesterday at the Leafs game. And now he scored the winning goal for the Islanders yesterday. The guy played for the Leafs for 4 years, 226 games, 42 goals. What is with this honoring of former players? And I know going back into the past, the Leafs were really bad. Guys like David Keon, they didn't get the respect that they earned. But have we gone over the top now?
Oh, yeah. It's completely nonsensical. You should have a video tribute for any player who left an impact in the market, either with the team, with the city, with the community, whatever. Pierre Engvall, who's a very nice man, by the way, was a marginal hockey player who played third and fourth line primarily, who never scored a whole lot of anything, and he's coming back to play. You know what? Let him come back to play. You don't need to. There's no need in the world to do what they did last night. And there's no need to, I think in one way, it kind of embarrasses the kid. Well, he's not a kid anymore. To me, they're all kids. And it embarrasses the team. There's no reason to. When Doug Gilmour comes back, and it's Doug Gilmour after having, 60-some points in 2 playoff seasons, yeah, that means something. Pierre Engvall, think of Pierre Engvall's greatest moment. You can't, because you haven't seen it.
And that's the thing. I mean, the crazy part about it, when they had the camera on the guy, he was so busy listening to Patrick Waugh, he didn't even acknowledge the fans, which I thought made the whole thing look even more clumsy. But anyway, enough of that cat. What's going on with the Leafs right now? 25, 15, and 8, 58 points, 4th in the Atlantic Division right now. Does this team have Stanley Cup hopes? Do you really believe this?
Do they have hopes, or should they have hopes, or should we have hopes?
Should we have hopes for them?
You always have hopes for a team that has so much top-end talent. Like they are at the top 4, or top 5 players. Maybe if hockey was a 5-man game, they would be favored to win the cup. But it's not. It's a 23-man game. And what's happened this season, and I think it's been the entire season, not just now, is they haven't found who they are. They haven't found their style of play. They haven't found what's going to work for them for the most part. They'll have a good day or a good couple of games, and then they'll go back and have a bad couple of games. Sometimes goaltending's been okay, and sometimes it's been terrible. Do I think they have a chance? I always say yes, because they're going to be in the playoffs and they have the high-end players. But would they be on my top 8 or 10 favorite list at this point? No. There's nothing to show me that this group, as it's currently constructed with this coach at this time, can be successful. I'm not convinced they can be. And every time I want them to be that, they'll come up with games like the one last night against the Islanders where, they just leave it short. And they're not supposed to leave stuff short when you're paying, next year Austin Matthews the most money in the NHL, and Willie Nylander $11 million next year, and Mitch Marner $10.9 now, and Tavares in the $11 range right now, and and Morgan Riley, whatever it is that he signed for, a lot of money for a lot of guys, or a very small amount of guys who aren't doing enough to justify any of it.
What about a 3-year contract to a guy like Ryan Reeves? That was a missed call, was it not?
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. And if you're a general manager, you're going to, at the end of your career, at the end of whatever season it is, you're going to look back. You're going to see the good things you do. You're going to see the bad things you do. And every GM has good signings and good trades, and every GM has bad signings and bad trades. The Ryan Reeves thing is really unimportant. It's $1.5 million in the big picture for a guy who really can't help you and can't play anymore. And they thought they needed a little bit of oomph in the lineup. And you can be oomph, but if you're 2 steps behind oomph, that's not good enough. So to me, Ryan Reeves isn't why you're winning. Ryan Reeves isn't why you're losing. And so people get caught up in that kind of stuff. I think it's really unimportant in the big picture. Important, Todd Bertuzzi. It's not Todd. Is it Todd? Tyler, sorry.
Tyler, yeah.
We don't want to mention Todd. Tyler Bertuzzi. $5 million. When you sign a guy for $5 million, it's only a 1-year deal, but if you sign a guy for $5 million, it's because you're expecting value. You're expecting him to be a difference maker, a guy who can change a line, can make your team a lot better. He hasn't done that. He has been a really average to below average player. He has not contributed much offensively. He has not scored much. That's a bad sign. You got the public's going to talk and say, "Oh, we got Ryan Reeves for 3 years." Grumble, grumble, grumble. No. Tyler Bertuzzi, bad signing.
It certainly does seem to be. He's really struggling, as they say, gripping the stick into double digits in terms of games of not even contributing a goal. I know he's had 2 goals that were not counted, but at the end of the day, he's not scoring. Let's expand this conversation about the National Hockey League right now. And I can't remember the last time where we've seen the likes of a Vancouver Canucks, we've seen the Winnipeg Jets, and of course the hottest team in the National Hockey League right now are the Edmonton Oilers right now. We always get to this kind of conversation near the end of the season or getting into the playoffs of who is Canada's team. But on the good side, at least there's a number of teams from this country that gives, Canadian hopes for a Stanley Cup. Am I not correct here?
Well, I don't think it matters who is Canada's team. I think what matters is, can any of these teams win the Cup or compete for the Cup? And that's where this gets interesting this year. There are 3 teams in the Western Conference, each of whom are capable of winning the West, I think. And that's the Edmonton Oilers, the Vancouver Canucks, and the Winnipeg Jets. There are 3 different styles of teams and 3 different ways to play, 3 different coaches. And obviously the stars at the top of each team are very, very different. But I think all 3 are going to be 100-point teams. And I don't think we've seen a situation where there's been 3 100-point teams in a conference at any time in NHL history from Canada. So it's 1993. My math is correct. This is year 31. There's a chance. I wrote this just before the All-Star game, that this could be the year that finally ends the drought. And a funny thing, the last time when it was Montreal in 93, and, Leaf fans will argue it should have been Leafs, Kerry Fraser, Doug Gilmour, the whole, we can revise that argument 1,000 times over. But Montreal won, and in that season was the last time anyone in the NHL scored 70 goals. It was Alex Mogilny and Teemu Selanne both scored in the 70s. Now this year people are talking about Austin Matthews scoring 70 goals, and it's the way Austin Matthews is scoring. That's not impossible. It's pretty hard, close to impossible, but it is. If he gets 70, then maybe this is the team that the year that one of those teams from the West comes out and wins the Cup. Now, you look at the West playoffs, you've got Vegas, you've got Dallas, you've got Colorado. Like, somebody's getting knocked out first round. Really, really good teams.
They're really good, heavy teams, too.
Yeah. And you're talking, that's what I'm saying. I think the West is way stronger at the top than the East is.
Mm-hmm.
And you look right there, and I think, Edmonton's what, 16 in a row, going to tie the record tonight.
Crazy.
See if that might happen. And if they beat, I think it's Vegas tonight. If they beat Vegas, I think they've got a nice schedule for a while. They could keep on this run for some time, and you don't want to peak too early. Walking out of the All-Star game, just the players come in and do their sort of final interviews, and I stopped Connor McDavid on the way out, and I said, I hope to see you in June. And he said, what's June? And then he looked at me and said, oh yeah, that'd be nice.
Funny, you talk about that peaking too early. Just a quick note on this. I always think about really when I started to really get right into the National Hockey League around 1980, and you had those Philadelphia Flyer teams that were led by Pat Quinn, and I believe they went 35 games unbeaten at that time. And that's when in the days when they had ties, and they got beaten in the Stanley Cup by the New York Islanders. So I mean, these long win streaks or undefeated streaks sometimes don't get you the prize in the end.
Or the long losing streak. When the Leafs won the Cup in '67, I think they lost either 9 or 10 in a row in the middle of the season, and then Punch Imlach either had a heart attack or faked a heart attack or something happened, and King Clancy came in and coached for a while and got them back on track, and they came out in the playoffs and beat everybody. And I covered the Calgary Flames between the first 7.5 years they were in Calgary, and they got to the finals in 1986. And they had a big losing streak in the middle of that season. And there was talk of, maybe you'd fire the coach, do something. And then they come out in the playoffs and they were great. They should have won the Cup that year. Should have beat Montreal. Montreal won the Cup. But it's, what happens in the season, as we found out with the Florida Panthers last year, as we found out with the Los Angeles Kings a few years ago, what happens in the season ends in the season. Or the Boston last year, best example I came up with.
Great example.
Boston, best team in history, doesn't get out of the first round. My friend Brian Burke, who's not really my friend, always says, you get in, and then let's see what happens. And so you get in, and in Burke's words, let's see what happens. And that's Florida went in from the last spot and got to the final, and we'll see what happens. But those three teams in the West, man, they're dangerous. But Vegas is dangerous. Colorado with McKinnon is dangerous.
Wow, he's hot.
And watching him play, it's crazy. He's going to be the MVP, I think, this year.
He has to be so far.
He's going to win the Hart Trophy. He's just having a sensational season, and he's so much fun to watch. And that Dallas team, very good goalie. They got an A1 defenseman in Miro Heiskanen, and lots of depth up front. So there's a lot to choose from in the Western Conference.
Last thing on the National Hockey League, and I know you were in town for the big press conference that went on, and there was multiple discussions. Let's center in on the return. And I know you've covered, umpteen, double-digit numbers of amounts of Olympics. Is this important for the National Hockey League to get back on the world stage with this sort of best-on-best competition?
I think it's important for the National Hockey League players and for the fans of the NHL. I don't think the owners want to be there. I don't think Gary Bettman wants to be there. I think if they had their choice, they would not go. But they are supporting the players right now. The players really want to go. Like the young stars in the NHL, McDavid and Matthews, and these guys have not had a chance to play in this kind of best-on-best circumstance, playing for your country. And so, by this age, Kane and Taves and Sidney Crosby and all these guys had played in multiple Olympics. It hasn't been the same for this group coming out at this time, and they want their cake and they want to play on the big stage. I don't believe it's ever turned out to be the great panacea for making money or spreading hockey around the world that the NHL was sort of hoping it would become. But for hockey fans, and I consider myself both a hockey fan and a person who covers hockey. I love the game. I absolutely adore it. The best hockey I've ever seen is Olympic hockey. The best hockey I've ever seen live is Olympic hockey. And I hope that if you're 20 years old right now, you've never really seen Canada, Russia, Canada, Sweden, Canada, the U.S., at the absolute best. And hopefully we get that in 2 years' time. And, I was really happy to hear that announcement come because, as someone, I think I may be the only person who covered every Olympic tournament that involved NHL players, or I'm one of the few anyhow in Canada that has. And I've covered every Olympic hockey tournament. I covered every Olympic hockey tournament from 1988 to 2018. So I've seen really bad hockey. 2018 may be the best example in Korea, and I've seen phenomenal hockey. The 2014 Canadian team in Sochi might be one of the great Canadian teams that's ever played, and the 2010 Olympics was just spectacular hockey.
The best part about that, and it's great, you're right, you're talking about generation and maybe getting on generations that have not been able to enjoy watching this type of hockey. And you're correct in saying, and I'm getting the good feeling from a lot of the players, that this is exactly what they want. Let's change gears to the Canadian Football League. You are in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, which is a wonderful accomplishment. So many wonderful names, columnists, writers, and contributors in that sense. I know you're obviously away right now, not so much close to the situation, but I have not seen since this free agency communication window was open, allowing teams to openly reach out to players that are set to hit the open market in free agency. I have not seen so much media talk, Twitter back and forth. Like, people in Hamilton are worried right now that Simone Lawrence hasn't been signed, that he may not be back. This has got to be good for the league. Like, I know the season is not here and the games determine how good the league is, but the commissioner's got to be really happy about all this talk off season about the game.
Well, I think one of the problems the CFL has faced for years and years and years, not just from newspapers but television networks, is that we don't do enough off-season coverage. We don't do enough. You look at what happens on the NHL on July 1st with free agent frenzy, and they run a full day of television with and some guys that no one's ever heard of signs, and he gets interviewed and everybody gets excited. The CFL doesn't seem to garner that kind of excitement or regular coverage. But if you follow it sort of on an online kind of way and more a social media kind of way, because that's where there's more coverage now than ever before, there's a lot going on. And there's a real danger in free agency in Canadian football. On the one hand, you love the discussion. You love the conversation. You love, people talking about your game and your players and everything that matters. What you don't want to see, at least I don't want to see, too many players changing teams. Because I think if there's been a historical flaw with the CFL, is that the rosters don't stay together long enough. We look at the Winnipeg Blue Bombers now, how many Grey Cups in a row, or they didn't go this year, but how many, Grey Cups did they win, and how many did they play in, and how they've been the best team in the CFL for a 5 to 7 year period. And they've really had a lot of the same players, same quarterback, same receivers, same, defensive linemen, same linebackers. It helps in your market to establish who you are as a team, who your players are. Hamilton, they want Simone Lawrence because he's one of them. He's a guy that he's glue. He's part of, the colors. But what's happened is the teams are in position where they're dealing with really fragile salary cap numbers, and they want better players, and so it's going to cost more. So you have to decide: am I spending my dollar, on this, or am I spending my dollar on that? And am I going out for hamburgers, or am I eating steak? And what I hope for is to see every team strengthen itself to make the league better, because that the better the teams play, the more fun the games are. But I don't want to see a lot of roster movement, because I think that's been a historical flaw of the league, that you don't get to know who the players are in your market.
And that's a great point, and I'll direct it right at you because I know the team you follow that you cover the most would be the Toronto Argonauts, and I know you and I, talked in the media booth on that day at the East Final of the fact that they laid the biggest egg that anyone could have ever expected on that day against the Montreal Alouettes, and how that was going to hurt the market. And now the fact that Corey Mace, the defensive coordinator, has gone over to Saskatchewan, and there are so many defensive players that the Argos have lost. I mean, the Tiger Cats just took their second leading sacker today. Is that going to be a big problem for the Toronto market?
I don't think when you say Toronto market, that's a real tangible thing. I think the Argos are still searching to find what is that market. Who are they? Who are the people who care? The Argos have a really rabid, small following. What they don't have is what, say, the Maple Leafs or the Blue Jays have, which is, sort of an over-the-top size following. And so I'll give you an example, when Curly Gittins gets traded to Edmonton, the way he was traded recently for a defensive lineman, and what I was told was just they needed the money on the salary cap somewhere other than at receiver because they thought they had decent Canadian receivers, so they made the move that they made. But if you're, say, I'll use me as an example, or I'll use my wife as an example. If you're a season ticket holder like my wife is, and you're sitting in the stands and Curly Gittins is one of your favorite players, then you're not going to be happy to see him traded. But it happens because you've got people like John Murphy who are looking at all of the roster possibilities and saying, to build the best team we have, the only way we can do it is we're going to, it's kind of the old rotisserie league baseball thing that we all played years ago. They give you so much money, you have to buy this number of players, and then you've got to figure out how you're going to spend it all and where you're going to put your money. And that's what every CFL team is doing now. They're trying to figure out where their money fits best and how it fits best. And yeah, you're going to lose popular players because, a guy that gets better is going to want, more cake, as they say. And when you don't have a lot of cake to give out, the Argos just cut, for example, I thought a really, really good kicker in Boris Beattie. A really good guy, can kick, guy can punt, guy can do everything. His problem is he's American. So they figured they can bring in a lesser kicker, probably for less money, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name because I'm not good at it.
Lirim Hiralahu.
Aigu, or however we say it.
From St. Catharines.
They're bringing him in. He's not as good a field goal kicker as Beattie. He's on a stronger leg. He's not as good a puncher, but he's Canadian. So they'll live with a little less of something to get a little more of something, to get a little more somewhere else where they can put another $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000. And I don't envy any of those guys that have to make those decisions because it's tough sledding.
Quick question on the CFL. Could it exist without a salary cap?
I don't think so. Because really it's such a, I don't know, limited is the right way to put it, but the amount of money that comes in is finite, and they know what it's going to be, and this is what they need, and therefore, you're going to get teams who will want to, let's use the Saskatchewan Roughriders as an example. I think they're the richest team probably in the CFL. And so if you had free agency without a cap and you had the Saskatchewan Roughriders spending whatever they want to spend, and the Ottawa Renegades don't have that kind of luxury and therefore, can't compete in that way. And so, that's where you need constraint, I believe. I don't like the salary cap for coaches and executives that the CFL has. I think that hurts the product. But I think the salary cap for the players, even though it hurts the players' ultimate way of making money, is necessary to keep the league thriving as much as it thrives.
Let's talk about money, but switching sports. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. today, big day, arbitration. He wants 19.9. The Blue Jays want to play $18 million. And I'll just use that as a microcosm on this whole conversation with the Blue Jays. Are you happy with what has been done? Has enough been done? Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I mean, you go wild on this, Steve, on the Blue Jays, because I don't know what to expect out of this team this year, especially coming off the disappointment of the playoff loss during the wild card series.
I would have loved to have been in charge of the arbitration from the Blue Jays' perspective on Guerrero, because I would have done it in a very short piece of film. Here is my arbitration case against Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and we're showing him getting picked off from second base in a playoff game, fully asleep, by the way. Maybe the most embarrassing moment of the Jays season. And other than pulling Berrios from the game, where he was pitching brilliantly. But, to me, if they offer 18 and you want 19 something, take the bloody 18 and prove yourself, because you haven't done it yet. I mean, he did it a few years back when they played part of the season in Buffalo and part of the season in Florida and the rest of the season in Toronto because of COVID. And so the numbers were a little out of whack that year. Since then, his numbers have been okay, but not superstar-ish numbers. And so, to me, this is almost too much money now for Guerrero of what the Jays are offering. Never mind, what he's going to get, because he's going to get one of those two, awards. And I just don't think at this point in time he has played to what they thought he was going to be. They thought that when he had the big year, second in MVP behind Shohei Otani, and when Shohei is playing, that's all you're ever going to be, is second in MVP if you're that great. And so Guerrero was there. That was fantastic. But he hasn't done anything close to that since. And so there's a real question as to who he is and what he's going to be. And I'll be honest, if I was in management for the Jays, I would be looking to see what I could get for him in a trade, and to see if somebody out there doesn't value him the way, maybe the Jays did value him prior to the last couple of seasons. And then maybe you can get 2 or 3 guys for him that makes your team better. Strange thing is everybody, is down on the Jays and this sort of quiet off season, and there's reason to be. But we also have to understand that this is basically a 90-win team. They've been a 90-win team for like 3 years. 90 wins is a lot of wins. It's a 90-win team. They've just been dreadful when the playoffs have started. So they're 0-6 in their 6 playoff games. And this group together has never won a playoff game. And they've been a wild card team every year. They've never won the division. And now Baltimore was great last year and added a Cy Young Award winner this year. So they should be as great or close to that. And so there's pressure on this Blue Jays team to be better, but it's really hard to be better than 90 wins when you're not making yourself better with your players unless you do it internally. So one of the people you have to do it internally with is Vladdy Guerrero Jr. And now the hope is that, arbitration tends to sour players against teams on a long-term basis. Those who have been through it will tell you that. Be interesting to see, because I've sort of questioned Vladdy's maturity as a professional baseball player on a day-to-day basis. It takes a certain maturity to play in the big leagues, in a certain way you have to adjust and do all the things that are necessary. And as far as I'm concerned, I haven't seen that all the way from him yet. And so we'll find out again this year, closer to who he is and what he's going to be and how he reacts to, say he loses the arbitration. Is he going to be a powder? Like, we don't know that yet. And it's going to be interesting to see sort of where he plays and how he becomes in a lineup that didn't do a lot of scoring last year and have lost some players that were part of that, offense that was better than what they should have right now.
Because I look at this team right now, Steve, and I feel like that Atkins is kind of hoping for a lot of things, that the pitching staff will be as good and healthy as that, they were last year. That, the big kid is going to be better. Manoah, that he'll snap out of his funk. Right now, I don't know who the third baseman is. They brought back Kiermaier. Like you said, the Yankees aren't going to be bad forever. The Red Sox aren't going to be bad forever. You've already talked about how good the Orioles are. You're charging a lot of money for people in this new, stadium that's been rebuilt, and it's a beautiful facility, and I'm sure it's going to look even bigger with this .2 sort of I guess rearrangement that they've made, and the stadium is going to be beautiful. But are we going to be seeing good baseball? Is I think the question.
Well, I can sell you on why the Jays should be great, and I can sell you on why the Jays won't be great. And I can make probably the case in either way. And you look at that pitching staff. It's the deepest starting pitching staff in baseball. And not only is it deep as the starters go, but you look at the bullpen, and it's deep. And I like Jordan Morano as a closer. I like the setup guys they have. I think they have a really sound bullpen and a really sound starting pitching staff. Now let's flip that. 5 guys I think started in the neighborhood of 30 games last year. That meant no one got hurt. Manoah got sent to the minors, but no one was hurt per se throughout the season, for a day or two. That's not going to happen every year. You're not going to have that much health. So it's possible that the 4 guys that they really depend on, and to starting anyhow, that's going. We're talking Gausman and Berrios and Bassett and Kikuchi and maybe Manoah, if Manoah comes back to anything close to form. Who's going to get hurt and how many starts are they going to miss and what's going to happen if they're out for any period of time and who takes those starts when they're out. So that's a question right off the bat. Last year they lacked power. Well, right now their starting outfield is Kiermaier in center, Varsho in left, and George Springer in right. There's not a power hitter there. That may be one of the lightest hitting outfields in all of baseball. As you said, we don't know who the third baseman is, although, they just signed Justin Turner and he'll play some there. And I presume, Khalifa, who was signed, has been around the big leagues, and, he'll play some third base, but, neither of them will play anything close to what Matt Chapman did, which was, Gold Glove-ish, great all-time kind of defense. So you can look at the lineup and say, well, defensively on the left side of the infield, they're not going to be as good as they were. We don't know who the second baseman is either, by the way. That will be figured out in whether it's David Schneider or Kevin Biggio or whoever. That will figure out in spring training. And so second base is a question, third base is a question, the whole outfield offensively is a question. DH is a question if Turner's playing third base, if he's not, but Turner's 39. There's going to come a point in time where he can't get around on the fastball, on the 100 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour guys that are throwing hard at him. And so there's a lot of things to wonder about, but this group essentially, with Chapman playing and not a whole lot of difference, was 89 wins, I think, last year. So, they can win. If guys have better seasons, they can win more. If guys have healthy seasons, they can win more. And if some guys get hurt or have bad seasons, they're going to drop. And, they did not bring a single player in the offseason, I believe, that will be a difference maker. And they needed at least one difference maker, especially offensively, to be a threat. And the good news is nobody's picking them to win anything, because the team that wins the winter never wins the summer. And so you look around and you see, the lists that are being put out now just before spring training is starting. They're around 10th, 11th best team in baseball, which means there's room to get better and there's room to go back. And because they didn't get a guy, what was the biggest money signing in the offseason? It's nobody. It's Justin Turner, $13 million, I think, a year. That's sort of
peanuts.
So it's hard to be excited about them, but they're darn interesting, at least, because we don't know what they are.
Real quick on the Blue Jays here. Did you really believe the Otani? Were they really in on him, do you think?
Yes. I believe they were. I believe that he had some interest also in Otani's a businessman in many ways. Otani was looking at, I'm going to get into another country. And if I get into another country, what's that going to mean for Japan? What's that going to mean for Japanese baseball? What's that going to mean for international things and sponsorships and all that? And I think he looked at that pretty closely. And you have to understand how the Blue Jays operate. For them to go out and sign Justin Turner as a free agent, for example, that's part of their budget. They have a budget for the off. They're given a budget. Here's how much money you can spend. To go and get Otani, you had to get approval from ownership. You had to get approval from the board of Rogers Communications. And you had to go and say, this is what we would like to spend. This is what we'd like to offer. This is how it works. This is how the deferred payment thing will work, blah, blah, blah. Will you approve this? Yes, we will. And so, yes, they went ahead and they made a significant offer. At the end of the day, as we know, it's like selling your house in a way. 4 people come in and make offers, and all 4 offers are the same. You're going to then decide which one of the 4 you're selling it to. And in this case, Otani was the person making the decision, and he wanted the Los Angeles Dodgers history. He wanted the winning history of the Dodgers. That's the one thing the Jays couldn't promise. Yeah. Was a winning history, because they don't have one unless you're talking about 92 and 93.
Long time ago.
Only a few of us were alive to see all that.
Let's end on this, Steve, and I think you're so qualified to answer this question because, you've been on radio, you've been on television. I always remember the Reporter Show. Boy, I wish they had brought that back. It was such a wonderful show for veteran reporters, guys that I really, really respected. That was a great, great show. You've written for years. We're in this place right now where Twitter is alive and well, or X, if you want to call it that. Social media, I'll just go there. What happened with Sports Illustrated, job reductions there. Where are we in terms of sports journalism? Are we in a good place right now? Is it going to last?
Well, I think when you say sports journalism, I think you're meaning sports media across the board, because there isn't a lot of journalism being done the way I would describe journalism compared to what we did years and years ago. What I think has happened is that the newspaper business is essentially dying. And as the newspaper business is essentially dying, there are fewer and fewer reporters working and fewer columnists working, and therefore there are fewer and fewer stories being written on a daily basis as the papers all shrink in size. And at the same time, the local news on television, where, I grew up in Toronto at the time, the local CTV station, CFTO, and Channel 11, and every single station had a sports department and 3 or 4 guys working in it. And they produced stuff every single day. That's not being done really the same as it was before. And so what's happened is that social media, and whether it be Instagram or Twitter or TikTok or wherever, has sort of taken over for the younger people who the people under the age of 40 don't read newspapers. They get their news from their phones and from other places. And so, so what you're getting is people who are not qualified, who don't have sources, who don't have knowledge, inside knowledge of circumstances, and they are now providing too much of the news on marginalized websites for across the board. And so what you're getting is a real inferior product, but the person who's reading it at home doesn't know necessarily that's an inferior product. And so you're seeing, I'll use the United States for example. What you're seeing now is that there's 3 or 4 insiders in every sport. A lot of them are ESPN people, whether it be basketball people or football people or baseball people. And they're the ones who break the stories, and they're the ones who tell you what's going on, and they're the ones who break down the breaking stories on a daily basis for the most part. The day of, and I was having this conversation yesterday, the day of going to a Grey Cup, I'll use an example, and having a columnist from Vancouver and a columnist from Edmonton and a columnist from Calgary and a columnist from Saskatchewan and a columnist from Winnipeg and all these people there, it was like a celebration of the best of Canadian sports journalism at these kind of events. Well, you go now and the teams that are playing will have representatives of their market, although the Montreal Gazette did not cover this year's Grey Cup, which involved the Montreal Alouettes, because papers don't spend the way we used to spend on covering things and traveling. And so where you'd get a Grey Cup with a variety of 35 different pieces a day on 35 different subjects written by 10 or 11 of the absolute best people in the country. And now you look around and it's, I hate to say that, it's 2 or 3 of us. I don't want to include myself in that category, but that's what it's down to. And one of them in Hamilton just got, he just finished up with The Spectator. So there aren't many of us left. And I started, my first column job was in Calgary with the Calgary Herald. And what an exciting thing it was to go to a big event and see Trent Frayne or Dick Beddoes or Milt Dunnell or Jim Proudfoot or Jim Taylor or any of the great legends of so many legends of Canadian sports journalism. All of them, I believe, are in the Hockey Hall of Fame or the Football Hall of Fame. And now you go and it's like, where is everybody? And what happened to them? And why aren't they here? And this is where we're at now. As the newspaper business sort of runs its course, what you're seeing is very limited coverage by the big networks. In our country, it's Bell and Rogers with TSN and Sportsnet, and they kind of decide what it is they want to cover and what it is they don't want to cover. And they tend to cover their own products. Rogers covers the Blue Jays and TSN covers the CFL, but they tend not to cover very much other than that. And so, like this week, this is Super Bowl week. TSN will probably be all over Super Bowl week because it's a Bell product. Mm-hmm. And whereas I'll use I'm Sun Media or the Post Media. I've been at 20 some Super Bowls. I don't believe we're at the Super Bowl this year because we don't do that anymore. We don't spend to send people to major events, unless there's a reason or unless there's a belief that, economically you can make sense of it. And so, yeah, you're not getting the stories and the quality and all that now. And you're getting a lot of junk, on Twitter from a lot of people who aren't qualified. And it's unfortunate for people who just want to read or learn. And it's unfortunate for those who just follow it this way and don't know better.
I come from an era, I'm of an age where when I started to going into locker rooms, when I started to go into media rooms, people like yourself and so many others were there for me to kind of watch and follow. And as you've seen it all too, I've kind of seen it as well too. So I actually feel very fortunate to see the likes of yourself in this business. And I feel like I've taken a little bit from every one of you guys because it's I mean, I guess time is time and change is change, and that's life, and that's the way it goes. But I do feel fortunate to go into as I said, go into an Eastern Final or at least a Grey Cup or whatever, and see you in there and writing away, and it's been a pleasure for me in terms of my career. And if I can never say that to you, I'd love to say that to you right now. So.
Well, it's so nice that you do say that, and it's funny. I was having this conversation yesterday with a former columnist who's also a Canadian Football Hall of Fame member, and we were talking about where we started and how we came out of the late 70s, early 80s, and a time when newspapers were king and money was being spent like it never had been before. And I think to myself, boy, have I had a lucky existence. I've been to 17 Olympic Games. I've been to 20-something Super Bowls and 20-something Grey Cups, and I don't know how many Stanley Cup finals, and so many events where the greatest athletes in the world were right in front of you, and you were telling their stories, or you were chronicling their stories. I was at Tiger Woods' first professional golf tournament. I was at Michael Jordan's game when he came out of retirement in Indianapolis, and at the press conference when he retired in Chicago because the Blue Jays were playing the White Sox in the playoffs at the time, or about to start the series the next day. So you start looking at where you've been in terms of things you got to cover, but not only that, who you got to cover it with. And, it's, I always felt, because I was for many years, I was the young guy among the column writers. And so, working around Michael Farber in Montreal, or around Roy McGregor in Ottawa, or before that, Milt Dunnell in Toronto, or Jim Proudfoot, or Trent Frayne, or Taylor in Vancouver, Bob Hanley in Hamilton. There were so many guys. And you looked up, they were, as a person whose life was newspaper, and I'm a newspaper nut. As a person whose life was newspaper, this was like hanging around your heroes, Dick Beddoes, so many of these guys, and now I look around and I was at the All-Star game on the weekend, and I'm looking around and I was just about the only old guy there. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's where it's come to now. And I'm in my 60s, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to work, or even how much longer my newspaper is going to be alive. But boy, do I feel fortunate to have been able to do that, been able to chronicle Wayne Gretzky's career, Mario Lemieux's career, and people like that. And I don't know if you saw, I wrote a book about a year. I did a collection of columns about a year ago as a book, yep. And the title is A Lucky Life. Yep. And it's about 90 columns from my career. Just sort of picked ones I liked and went with it that way. 90 of 9,000, so it's less than 1% of the amount of work I've done over the years. Mm-hmm. And the title, which I didn't really like when the publisher suggested it, when I look at it now, it's absolutely true, because that's what I've had. I've had a lucky life. And, I've had a dream job with the best sports newspaper you could have picked to be with at the time, and worked around some fantastic people, and got opportunities like no one. Like if you're in journalism school in Carleton right now and you hope to be a sports writer, where are you going, or you're going to get the opportunities I had for the last 35 years? Like, it blows me away when I look in big picture that I was there when Usain Bolt won, or when Mike Tyson knocked out Michael Spinks, or when Leonard fought Hagler, or Hagler fought Hearns, or Crosby scored the overtime goal, or whatever moment it was that from 1980 on, a lot of the stuff I was at. And God, what a fortunate life I have led because of that.
Well, Steve, again, I mean, the book, I did read it, and it brought me right back, because almost everything you wrote, I remember. So, again, thank you so much for joining us. The stories were unbelievable. Your insight, your honesty, always appreciated. And again, look forward to seeing you at Ivor win. Look forward to seeing you at Tim Hortons when the season starts. And hopefully let's go for and end that 25-year drought for a Grey Cup. It's been too long here in Hamilton, and we want you to cover it.
Yeah, so we better get a better quarterback, I think, than Bo. But that's another subject for another day, I guess.
We'll save that one there. Thank you so much for joining us, partner.
Enjoyed it. Thanks, Bob.
We appreciate it. Folks, if sports with a Southern Ontario twist is your thing, the Sportsline Podcast certainly do want to hear from you. Contact us on many of the CHCH social media platforms. Please subscribe to the Sportsline Podcast on TikTok, YouTube, and I'll encourage you to comment, hit that thumbs up or the 5-star button so we always, or at least you always, get the latest edition and we get your feedback. For the amazing hands and minds that make this production possible, Steve Simmons, always a pleasure. Thank you for hanging out with us, folks, and we'll see you tomorrow.